Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and make your questions on how to do the same. Phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is a free call. 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624 or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
How was the 4th, Noah?
The 4th is amazing. It was a really great opportunity. I had an opportunity to spend some time with a good friend of mine from Wisconsin, and then we made it down to the cities, at least for a short little bit, and had the opportunity to go through the Mall of America, which if you've never been, I highly recommend it. It is a staple of a capitalist economy and all of the various things that you didn't think could exist, but they can exist when it's an economy of scale kind of a thing, like an entire store dedicated to beef jerky, that sort of thing.
An entire store dedicated to beef jerky.
And all the accessories that come with it, man. So it's not, they have like samples. You can get like 30 different samples of different kinds of beef jerky, but then above and beyond, it's like you probably didn't know you wanted some gummy bears to go with your beef jerky. But guess what they got, Steve? They got the gummies bears. And so you eat the gummy bears and it goes with your beef jerky. And then you got the sweet and the salty and you get it.
Are they special gummy bears? Is that one of those things that just makes you want to buy more of the?
No, I don't think they're infused with anything. I think they're just regular gummy bears. They're just regular gummy bears that happen to go good with the jerky of the beef.
Okay, then.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a good time. Yeah, it was relaxing, and I had to get a kick. I was chatting with you, and you said how did you phrase it? The patriots in your area continue to celebrate their freedom and independence all around your neighborhood, to include all hours of the night.
Yeah, starting Thursday right on through. It got a little much, honestly. By Sunday, I was like, okay, guys, sleep would be nice.
Freedom, Steve, my freedoms. Speaking about freedoms, so there is obviously no end to the choice of distros that you can choose, right? And there's lots of different reasons to go with one distro over the other, either by way of I want it to never change, right? I want it to be the Debian of the world, and I want it to just be there, and I want it to be solid, and I want it to be static, and I want it to never change. And then you got choices all the way up through Arch, which is bleeding edge. So it is every time an open source nerd on the internet pushes code up onto the internet, it becomes available to you on Arch. And for some reason, you choose to stay on Arch for reasons unknown to the rest of us. You've convinced me to switch over to Arch, and that's just where you and I have lived. And knock on wood, we've had very little problems until recently, when you bought a brand spanking new graphics card and threw it into your computer and had an issue with the drivers, and you had to work around that for a little bit until the nerd on the internet got the drivers there. Is that an accurate summation of how we got here? And if so, where are we at now?
Yeah, I want to make sure that we're clear. When I say a brand new video card, I don't mean just like new off the shelf. I mean like it was released on a Thursday and I got it the following Friday, sort of thing. So like really newly released, not just new video card. So as to not to scare people away too much, We're talking about like the leading of the leading edge when it comes to that sort of thing. So yeah, I had some problems with self-inflicted problems because I wanted a specific kernel and because of what I was doing with ZFS, and in order to, yada, yada, yada. In order to use a different driver, I needed a newer kernel, but I couldn't do it. And so I ended up making this kind of janky setup, which worked. It was fine. However, that problem, as I knew it would, had resolved itself. If you remember at the time, you asked, what would you do differently? And I said, probably not much, except for maybe wait a little bit longer. And that's all that really took. The drivers are now in the open drivers, I should say, are now in the repository that I need, and that resolved my problem. I ripped out the NVIDIA directly from their website, and I went with the package in the repository, and life is good, to the point where I actually went and bought a 5070 Ti because I was enjoying the 5060 so much. So yeah,
So hold on, whoa, we can't just drive past that. So where's the 70 going, and is it going to replace the 60, or how's that all going to work?
It already did. It
already
replaced
did?
Yeah, it did. It was kind of a reward for myself. I've been working on digging this archery pit in the backyard forever, and I was like, you know what? If I get it done, I'm going to buy the card. I almost got it done. I actually bought the card, and it was sitting here, and I am very close to completion, but I got rained out. And because of how far down I had to dig this pit, it's clay. And so it's taking forever to dry out, but it's effectively done. Like, I got a couple more hours worth of work, but anyways, I went and got the card. So the 5060 is currently sitting on my desk right now because it's going to eventually go in my RHEL box that is doing a bunch of AI stuff for me. And drivers being what they are, and RHEL moving at the speed that it does, I'm giving it a little bit more time before I yank out that 10-year-old Quadro and put this card in there.
Interesting. Oh, this is fascinating to watch through. Okay, that card will make its way into the Red Hat box because by then you will have drivers there. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. Well, I am just waiting on the drivers. The card has been sitting on my desk for at least 2 weeks at this point. I'm not in any particular dire need to switch out that Quadro. It would be nice to have the extra speed, but it's doing its job. So I'm just kind of watching the drivers, waiting to see when they get updated, and when that happens, or when I sell the Quadro, because it's up on eBay. One of those two things will happen. If I sell it, then I'll have to go and figure out the driver situation, or if the drivers come down and I can actually tell what's going on, then it'll go in. So it'll go in at some point.
Very cool. Your questions entertained at 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. So after the show, some people don't know, but there is a mumble room. It's mumble.minddrip1.com, and you can join as a voice server. You can hang out with us during the show, but then also after the show, we just kind of hang out and nerd out, and we talk about all manner of different things. And one of the things, Steve, that you've been talking about is your challenges with certificates. So if you could you give us the 30-second elevator pitch or the 1-minute recap of where we're at with certificates and why you're on a quest to automate them? What's wrong with just renewing them by hand, and how is that timetable going to change here in the near future?
So I guess the TLDR is back at the beginning of the year, I caught wind of the motion that Apple and Google and Meta and a few others have put forward to reduce the time that a certificate is valid for. And it's going to be reduced down to, I believe, 28 days. And Apple would even like it to be 7 days. They have a timetable for that. And it's like over the course of the next 2 years, it's going to be ratcheted down slowly. And so I think right now it's at 90 days or something like that. I forget right off the top of my head. But the point of that is, if you're managing certificates, you pretty much want to have it automated by the time that they get down to like 28 days or maybe even 7 days. And so I was going through the process. I had figured out how to automate it, and I put it inside of Ansible AWX, which is an upstream project for Ansible automation platform. And it was running fine in there until AWX broke, and I couldn't figure out what I did or how to fix it. And so it has remained broken, and that automation is down. So I was telling the mumble room about that, and listener Tiny in there was telling me about how he was using Semaphore and some other projects that I haven't had time to look into as a replacement, which is basically, so Semaphore is essentially a UI for being able to run various automation platforms. So it started off as Ansible, and now it has Terraform is in there, and several other automation platforms are now available there. So I began my transition to this new platform, and ultimately, that exposed the fact that I was relying on, let's say, some Red Hat sauce in the AWX product that when I moved it to Semaphore, which is much closer to a pure Ansible situation, they didn't work. So I spent a lot of time reworking my certificate management stuff to be able to get it to work in Semaphore, and that has been kind of an interesting journey.
Are you there yet, or are you close?
So I would say that I ported the existing stuff and I fixed a ton of bugs in the sections that I had problems with. So one of the things that you can do in the Ansible automation platform, you can set up workflows and then chain workflows together. And because of that, you basically are treating them like discrete work units that are just kind of tacked on one after the other. And as far as I know, in Semaphore, that's not exactly the way that it works. They expect tasks to be kind of encompassed together. And so because of that, I was making some assumptions I had to go fix. So the short answer to your question is I'm like 99% of the way there. I have a couple little niggly things, like the certificates all rotate on their own. That part of it's golden. Most of them get deployed to all the places that I need. I have like a couple of little niggly things that I still need to work out. And part of that is adjusting to the new reality of Semaphore. So like for instance is one of the ways that you can rotate your certificates for Home Assistant is you do a Samba mount and then replace the files on the file system and then restart Home Assistant. The way that the Semaphore container is constructed, that wasn't possible. So I actually had to modify the container a significant amount to be able to get my automations working, because some of it is not possible to rewrite because the functionality just didn't work. But at the end of the day, I think I'm better off for it. I got a little bit better understanding. It kind of our continuing theme about you should really understand how the thing works. I can tell you right now, I have a significantly better understanding of how Semaphore works because I had to rebuild the container than I did of how AWX worked.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So you think you're going to stick with it?
I think that it's going to serve the purpose. I think that it's a decent project, and I haven't seen any reason to be concerned.
Stay up to date with the latest. Continue to listen and follow along with Steve. Should we do some feedback?
Let's do it.
Our first email comes in from Nick. Nick writes in and says, "Hi, Noah and Steve. I was taking my son on a college tour this past week, and of course, I was listening to the latest Ask Noah show. My son looked at me, and he said, 'That's you, isn't it? They're talking about you.' He knew my frustrations with Docker and Kubernetes, and he picked up on it right away. We listened to the rest of the show, and for the rest of the drive to our first college, my 16-year-old summed up what you guys were saying in his own 16-year-old way. I had a few days of no technology, no Docker, no Kubernetes, and nothing weighing on my mind except paying for my son to go to college. On the way home, the two conversations merged into one, and it was clear. I knew I need to know how it works and how it functions, even how it fails if I'm going to bring this or anything new to others. My road from the trade school back from the days of the late 90s to the senior software developer has been paved with this exact scenario, and I usually dig down and start from the source. I need to do that with Kubernetes. Thanks, Nick." Steve, we did it. We convinced him.
We are we're preaching the good word, you know.
But in all seriousness, what we're trying to do is we're trying to put you back in the driver's seat. It doesn't work if you're sitting in the passenger seat and occasionally reach over and want to, put in new coordinates on the GPS and then just hope that the magic purple line takes you to where you want to go. Like, that's great until you wind up in the ditch, and then you're like, well, how do I get back on the road? Well, it turns out I don't know how the car works. And so we're trying to get you back in everybody, not you. I'm not picking on you, Nick. But the collective you. We're trying to get you back into the driver's seat. And in fact, I would go as far as to say that's one of the things that draws Steve and I to Linux in the first place, right? If we wanted technology to just be this nebulous thing that appears in front of us, we'd be sitting in front of Apple products. But we have a desire to be able to own and operate the technology and make some choices along the way. That's, I think, how you get to the Linux.
It is apparent to me that, and I'm going to continue to make this mistake, even though I'm out here telling you that you shouldn't make this mistake. Mm-hmm. But It is apparent to me that every time that I adopt a technology that I don't really understand, it really becomes a problem for me. And I was just thinking, well, as you were reading this, I was thinking back like, okay, there was that project that I tried and that project that I tried and that one blew up on me. And the problem is like when something breaks, that's not the time that you really want to be with your back against the wall trying to fix it. Like I think about...
You mean that's not the best learning environment, Steve?
Well, I mean, it can be, but at the same time,
Trial
it's
by
like...
fire.
I was just lucky that it broke between needing certificate renewals and I would have had to do it all by hand, which I had. I had all of my backup scripts and I could have fallen back on it. But I think about a number of projects that I've relied on over the years and how they broke and I couldn't figure out how to fix them in the 1 or 2 hours that I poked at it. And at some point, then I just abandoned it.
Sure.
And then what good did that do me overall?
Well, I wouldn't entirely. I mean, is there something to be said about experience and playing in a sandbox you ordinarily wouldn't have climbed in?
Well, but I guess that's different though because
Actionable skill comes out of it per se.
Well, I think the difference though is if you're actually intending to go in and play in the sandbox. I think about all the times that this has bit me, and I just wanted this thing to get out of my way because I was trying to do something adjacent to it.
Sure.
And so then I put this thing in place that I didn't really understand, which is completely different than I'm going to put in something like a technology that I want to like use and play with, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I wanted to run AWX to run some Ansible stuff. I didn't want to run AWX to learn how to massage the actual underpinnings of it, and so I got to be a pretty competent user of it, but not to the point where I actually understood how it worked underneath to be able to go and fix it.
Very interesting. Your feedback is entertained at live@asknoahshow.com. That is the way to get it in front of our eyeballs, and that is what keeps the show going. So if you have a question, I'll remind you of the rules of engagement. The show is predicated on you writing in and asking questions. If you don't do that, Steve and I go on all manner of different rants and raves and various different rabbit holes that we have to pull ourselves back out of. So help us help you by letting us know the places that you stub your toe, the challenges that you have, or the successes. Let us share in those as well. All of it happens at live@asknoahshow.com or give us a call at 855-450-NOAH during the show. David writes in and says, "Howdy, Noah and Steve. Regarding your question in episode 448 about Framework, I've been running a 13 since they launched, batch number 1, and I love it. Over the years, I've upgraded and swapped enough parts to know that I now have a second machine that's replaced my wife's old Dell Inspiron after it died. I've also been running the dual laptop lifestyle, Framework 13 for lightweight on-the-go stuff and the 16 for the bigger stuff when I need to go to work with more demanding things. I'm super excited about the 12. I've never had a laptop that small or a tablet that big, but here I am for it. If it doesn't end up being a throw-in-the-bag machine, it'll still be a useful replacement for my Galaxy Tab for reading comics on my Cativa instance. Just being able to get the keyboard out of the way for those times when I want to read something, but I'm not as cool as Steve and I have to physically would be quite helpful. Thanks for all you guys do. The show makes Tuesdays one of my favorite days of the week. David." So, David, we appreciate you listening more than we can put into words. Steve, does that sales pitch give you anything by way of the 12? Because I got to tell you, I'm as excited as he is. Some of you know my dirty secret. I have a 10-inch laptop from 2015, and the reason that I hang on to it and the reason that I use it is because it's the only laptop that I can run Linux on that is small enough to be able to go all of the places with me, to include all the places that are socially unacceptable to take laptops in.
I think that I've got old man eyes, and I'm not sure how much I would enjoy working a decent amount of time on a 12-inch.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. My counter to that is you're not working any decent amount of time. If you're working a decent amount of time, you're going to a dock, you're going to a desktop, you're going to a real laptop. It's for you're sitting on the couch and you want to DuckDuckGo what that president was, or what administration did this, or check the bank account, or whatever it is, the thing that we all reach for the computing devices for. I think that's where it really takes. Or I'll tell you what, the other thing about that little 10-inch laptop, it sucks 38 watts of energy. That's amazing when you're sitting on like an airplane or you're going to be on a long international flight for 14 hours. I know you say you don't work, so maybe that's not a thing, but you can watch movies or you can listen to things. There's all manner of different entertainment options you can do on the laptops if you got power.
I suppose. The counterpoint to that is I read books and listen to my audiobooks and stuff like that. And I also have my Steam Deck. So
hard copy. I understand.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of July 6th, 2025, here's the Linux and open source news. GNU Cache 5.12 has been released, while GNU Bash has its 5.3 release. Perl 5.42 is now available. Digicam has released version 8.7. The open source IDE Genie has announced version 2.1. Amarok 3.3 brings big changes to the beloved Linux music player. In distro news, 4M Linux 48.1 is out. Xtix 25.7 is available. Berry Linux 1.42 has been released. And Rhino Linux 2025-03 is out. In open source security news, developers face a torrent of malware threats as malicious open source packages surge 188%. Researchers have identified more than 16,000 malicious open source packages across popular ecosystems. 2 vulnerabilities were recently spotted in various Linux distributions, which, when chained together, allow local attackers to escalate their privileges and thus run arbitrary files. The vulnerabilities are tracked as CVE 2025-32462 and CVE 2025-32463. They were found in the sudo command line utility for Linux and other Unix-like operating systems. Hackers are increasingly targeting misconfigured Linux systems that are exposed via SSH in a most recent wave of assault, monitored by the OnLab Security Intelligence Center. They do this by using weak credentials to deploy illegal proxy software for malevolent reasons. By leveraging open source tools such as TinyProxy and Singbox, adversaries are converting compromised systems into proxy nodes to facilitate anonymity in further cyber attacks or to sell access to criminal profit. In open source AI news, in September 2024, Skywork first open sourced the Skywork Reward series models and related datasets. On July 4th, 2025, Skywork continues to open source the second generation reward models, the Skywork Reward V2 series, comprising 8 reward models based on different base models of varying sizes, with parameters ranging from 600 million to 8 billion. And Google AI just open sourced an MCP toolbox to let AI agents query databases safely and efficiently.
Francis Chow. He is the Vice President and General Manager of Red Hat In-Vehicle Operating System and Edge at Red Hat, and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah Show. Francis, welcome back into the program.
Glad to be back.
Can you tell me a little bit about what your role is at Red Hat?
So I am responsible for the Edge business at Red Hat, although my title sounds a little bit more complicated, right? The reason why it is that way is because I have a product responsibility on in-vehicle operating system, and that's typical kind of Red Hat arrangement in the BU, but I also have an overall portfolio responsibility on Edge, so I try to help seed and grow that business at the corporate level.
So Francis, when we spoke in 2023 about Red Hat's in-vehicle OS, it was really an enlightening time for me to actually learn what you guys were doing. Can you kind of give us an overview of how the project has progressed over the last 2 years?
We have a lot of ups and downs. Definitely, it was not easy to try to safety certify a Linux operating system. In fact, we might have talked about it last time, all the efforts in the industry to try to do what we are doing have failed for a lot of reasons, right? Partly was because of the challenge of the standard. The safety standard was written about 14 years ago, and it was, at that time, it was targeting microcontrollers running maybe 100,000 lines of codes. Now we have systems that are microprocessor based, not quite deterministic, with GPUs and other components, and with software, in the neighborhood of 100 million lines of code. So it's very complex, and we try to form fit a modern operating system to a somewhat dated safety standard. It's been quite challenging. So the team has been trying to mapped out, hey, how do we do it in a reasonable amount of time without strictly following the standard? Because the standard, because it's very literal on documentations and writing requirements and a lot of documentations, it would have taken us, because of the complexity of Linux, right, roughly about 20 years if we do it literally, which is not a good idea because I might have died by then. So we're lucky to have a partner, Exida, who is our safety assessor. So we partner with them to see, hey, the world needs a better modern operating system for the auto industry so that we can innovate faster, build cars that are safer, and be able to really have an ecosystem that contribute, right, to these capabilities. And a lot of things also needs to be cloud native, right? So native Linux provide a lot of these advantages. So what we've been working is how do we create a tailored safety approach that is still aligned to the risk management objectives of the standard, but in the end, we can still achieve what the standard requires for outcomes. So we're very happy and to share that we announced it yesterday that we have achieved the ASIL B certification of our Linux product for automotive.
Inside the news, we hear these terms, software-defined vehicles or software-enabled vehicles. What do those terms mean? Can you kind of define those and help us understand at a very macro level, what is it that you guys are doing? What is it that you're trying to accomplish?
Well, I tell you, if you ask 10 people in the industry what software-defined vehicle means, you're probably going to get 11 answers. But to us, at least, what software-defined vehicle means is the vehicle that you purchase would increase in capability after you purchase it, right? So your car should evolve over time and have new capabilities. And the way to accomplish it is with a software-defined architecture and approach. Because in the past, vehicles have been designed with a very hardware-centric approach. Usually after production, there's no easy way to update or upgrade your vehicle capabilities. With the software-defined approach, we're taking a platform, right, with Linux, a great platform for software. Now you have the ability to add capabilities as applications on that platform. And this is how we look at software-defined vehicles, is you need to take a software-defined architecture, right, to build your car.
Do the manufacturers want to move to software-defined systems, or is it more a function of the cart got there before the horse, so to speak? You know, that is to say, they got themselves into a position where all of these different manufacturers are making all of these different components, and all of a sudden they realize, oh my gosh, they all are running on different softwares, and how do you update it, and how do you test against safety and compliance, those sorts of things?
I think there's definitely demand from customers, consumers. We all want more features, more safety, more personalized experience driving our vehicles. And it's getting to a point that the requirements are so complex that the current approach is no longer scalable. Yes, you can still build cars that way, but it's too expensive, it takes too long, projects are delayed. And this is where we think, hey, yes, as painful as it is to go through this transition, we need to move to a way that is way more scalable, that you don't have to rebuild your software stack every time you build a new car model or production year. Your software should just be living the whole time as a platform. You pick your hardware, and then you just deploy it and test it with the system.
So right now, a vehicle as we know it is a complex state machine. There are isolated systems that all operate in a very limited number of situations. You know, your brakes, they're engaged, they're not engaged, or they're kind of in that back and forth with ABS and traction control going off. In that paradigm, everything, as you said before, is run and controlled by little microcontrollers with their own little software around them. What is the benefit to then saying, we've got all these isolated systems that operate and do one thing really well? What's the benefit of bringing them all together into an OS and having them all live together in a single point?
I don't think it's that 1 or 0 kind of argument. Right now, as you said, right, we probably have about 100 to 150 of these, what we call ECUs, engineering or embedded control units inside a modern vehicle. I don't think we would need to move to like one or even 2 to 5 high performance compute systems, but most of these functions should be consolidated right into, let's say, 2 to 5 high performance compute platforms. But there will still be certain functions that remains as a microcontroller base because of good reasons, like anti-lock brakes or airbag deployment. They're best served with a certain way of design and doesn't need to be changed, right? Because these are very specific functions. But if you look at, trying to personalize your driving experience, you look at some of the new AI capabilities that you heard a lot about in the summit. These require a different approach to system designs. And there's also other functions like, do you need to have one microcontroller controlling your left window, or you can consolidate, all the windows and mirrors, right? And some other functions into kind of one ECU that you can control. Still, right, with the ability to isolate some of these functions for safety reasons. And the answer is yes, right? We should take advantage of these new capabilities in software designs.
For a long time, we have done security audits and we pay attention to CVEs as it relates to our laptops and our servers and our switches and those sorts of things. It's a fairly recent thing, though, to start to consider the fact that as computers run code, now all of a sudden there are exploits that can be used against them. There's some widely publicized cases of attackers being able to, or I shouldn't say attackers, but security research being able to override certain systems inside of vehicles by gaining unauthorized access to them. What does that landscape, how is that landscape changing, and what plans does Red Hat have to kind of help vehicle companies address those?
Definitely it is a huge concern, right? Because without security, there's actually no safety, right? You can have your safety certified system, but if someone can hack into your system and change things, right, then it means nothing, right, to have that safety certification. So those two have to go hand in hand. And as you said, modern software systems have vulnerabilities, right? All systems also have vulnerabilities, right? The question is, right, how do we manage this complexity, right? And I think this is where Red Hat would help the industry is we have expertise managing these CVEs and security holes in mission-critical enterprise IT systems for the past 2 decades. We know how to do it. And we're trying to bring that expertise so that as the industry transition to a software-defined architecture with more modern OS, right, so that we still can maintain those systems to be secure.
Anytime I hear security, anytime I hear compliance, my mind immediately kind of goes to declarative systems. What role, if any, do declarative systems have in addressing some of these challenges to where you can say, I want the code to be this. I want this system to be that, and using some of those declarative technologies to come out and tell it, here's what it's going to be every single time because it's replicatable, it's reproducible every single time.
We definitely need some of that, right? I think generally speaking, the vehicle systems are more deterministic, right, than like a server system, right? Obviously, that's required for safety, right? Otherwise, it's very hard. If it's not deterministic, right, it's very difficult to prove, right, that the functions are repeatable and safe. But I think at the same time, we need to provide that flexibility on system designs, right? So while there's certain constraints, so with our safety certification, we have assumption of use, right? So there's certain things that you can do and not do with our operating system. But we're doing it in such a way that we still maintain the overall flexibility and capability of Linux. And then our safety approach also is to leverage container as a mechanism for isolation, which still give almost a maximum flexibility on software designs because your code will be contained in containers, and this is where you get the isolation.
So you touch on safety and certain things needing to be deterministic. And, we've talked about some of them already of things that need to be functional 100% of the time, no matter what, like ABS, airbags. You don't want a fault in your navigation system to cause your airbags to stop working. Right now, a lot of these systems that are running on just microcontrollers are running their own little kind of embedded real-time OS that are handling that one thing. But when you do have a more general stack, what is kind of the security framework to ensure that the different parts that need to be isolated and operating by their own safety standards and regulations, don't interact with anything else?
There are actually different safety requirements depending on the functionalities of the use case. For example, anti-lock brakes and airbags, they're what we call an ASIL-D level, the highest level of safety. This is not the target for the Red Hat in-vehicle operating system, right? We're trying to target use cases that are more at the ASIL-B level, right? So complex functions require, huge data handling, AI related, because AI is best to run on Linux, but not specific functions that, at the ASIL-D level. So the architecture that we would propose is still, hey, you can have a high performance compute system, but you need to have a safety island that still runs a hypervisor with an RTOS that are targeted ASIL-Ds, and then you have a more generic partition for ASIL-B and non-safety applications running on the host.
What roles are divided up between things that are safety in nature and requisite to the basic car's function, and how much of that is relegated to convenience? So, for example, if the in-vehicle entertainment doesn't work or the air conditioner does, that's one thing. Again, going back to it's different if the brakes don't work, right? How do you separate those vehicle domains up?
That's typically a car manufacturer design intent, right? There are definitely different ways to design with a high-performance compute system. For example, a car manufacturer can choose to put it more domain-specific. Oh, this is a system that does advanced driver assistance systems, right? Then you would have mixed safe and unsafe functions or components within that domain. Or a car manufacturer can choose to say, you know what, I have 2 or 3 of these compute systems. I have one that just run non-safe applications. Some of that will be infotainment, some of that will be advanced driver assistance systems, and I have a system that runs ASIL-B, and then a third system that runs ASIL-D, right? If you're gonna think about what car is evolving into, it's almost like a small cluster of compute, then you can actually choose your compute architecture that fits, the design desire of the automakers.
This is obviously an entire new domain for Red Hat to get into. Obviously, Red Hat is historically focused on, servers, laptops, desktops, the classic computers that we think of. When you're getting into a new domain like this, like with a car, that's a completely different paradigm, not just for development, but obviously everything that goes along with development as well, which is the testing and the validation. And unlike a server, where it's easy for me to spin up 100 VMs when I need to test something, I've made some code change, I need to make sure it works, let me spin up 100 VMs and go. You can't just spawn 100 vehicles in a warehouse somewhere to test all your different variations of software. So can you talk a little bit about the kind of testing and deployment, the CI/CD challenges that you faced developing a new operating system for an entirely new platform?
Great question. I would say that in the past, it was very difficult, as you described, because if you think about a typical developer, you have the developer's desktop, you have some hardware, some OS, and then you run your program on top of that. Most recently, you can do the same thing, right, in the cloud, but likely with a different hardware and operating system. And you can write codes and test on those. And you will have your own vehicle hardware that you need to eventually test with yet another different set of hardware and operating system. As you can imagine, when you do that, you can test things and it works here in one place, but not there in another place, right? And this is a huge pain point, right, for hardware development or hardware-centric development. And one of the advantages that we bring to the market with our Safety Linux is that now you actually, for the first time, have the same operating system running in the cloud, running on your desktop, and running in actual vehicle hardware. When you do your debug, your programming, your testing, if it works in one place, it should work in the second place and the third place. Now, then we recognize, it's actually quite complicated to have a cloud-native development and then be able to push your program into actual hardware. So this is why we actually recognize it and start developing what we call a development bundle. We haven't named that product yet, but the idea is we're going to put together a number of components that is already available at Red Hat, like OpenShift, databases, pipelines, and then put that together with a new project that we created. Upstream is called Jumpstarter. And now with that capability, a software developer can have the same test setup, run it in the desktop, run it in the cloud, and run it on hardware. Now, as long as anything is networked, you can actually push it to hundreds of hardware boards at the same time, same test setup, or you can spin up 10,000 virtual vehicles in the cloud to test scenarios overnight.
I want to preface by saying, like, I understand that you're not going to upload this stuff onto GitHub and I'm going to go download it and install it on my car. I understand that. But at the same time, everything that Red Hat does is open source by default. What role, if any, is there for Red Hat to influence the auto industry to say, hey, let's make sure that, in the same way that some tractor companies have kept people out of modifying and or tweaking their device, and in that case a vehicle, is there any room for Red Hat to be a positive influence on the auto industry to the extent that is possible and capable, open source some of those things?
I'm glad you asked. We recognize the need to actually bring more open source component to the industry, and I think a lot of the ecosystem partners also recognize that. And we've been working with the ecosystem on ways to kind of bring more open source mindset and collaboration approach in the open for the industry. So one good example is Eclipse Foundation, right? They have a project, Eclipse SDV, software-defined vehicle, and they have just recently created a project called S-Core, stands for Safety Core, and the idea is anything that is under the application, which is where the automakers should differentiate the vehicles, and above the hardware should be open and should be standardized. Because you know what, those layers are non-differentiating. You don't buy a car because of middleware from company A or OS from company B, right? You buy a car because of your experience that derive from the applications. So the idea is through the Eclipse collaboration, hopefully we can get enough ecosystem players, including car makers, to support this. And we already have BMW and Mercedes, right, in that project. And hopefully if we can get more folks supporting this, we can create a standard OS through middleware that could support all vehicle models and designs, and that becomes an open code that someone can then maintain and create a business for.
So when we spoke 2 years ago, I believe Mercedes had just signed on with the Eclipse Foundation, but I don't know if BMW had. But Red Hat was working directly with GM. First, I want to ask, how is that partnership with GM developed? And then second is, have there been any other partners that have directly joined with Red Hat on the in-vehicle operating system?
I appreciate the question. Unfortunately, I can only talk about what's public information. Understood. Right? So there hasn't been more public information about our work with GM, so I'm going to be silent on that. Outside of that, we did have a number of partnership announcements. And for example, last year we had announcement with Qualcomm and Renesas. Before that, we have ETAS and Deloitte and Luxoft. And then just yesterday, yes, we have a PR with our in-vehicle operating system getting safety certification, but we have an accompanying PR on the system, on the ecosystem that we have built. And if I remember correctly, I think between the two press releases, we have roughly about 15 partners that are providing a supporting code that they support the effort that we are working on, And we are working together to build pre-integrated solutions so that the industry can move faster with software-defined with an open source OS.
Can you talk about what, if any, partnerships are public and the work that you're doing with those companies?
Well, I would say that if you read through the blue press release that we did yesterday, you have a pretty good idea who is working with us.
Auto manufacturing and auto in-car software has been a very opaque and closed industry for a long time. Companies were developing their own hardware and their own software, and it was not being talked about outside of that exact manufacturer. Now bringing open source in and having an in-vehicle OS that's open source that many partners in the future can join, have you noticed the manufacturers themselves starting to change their viewpoint on let's keep everything private and really closed down to actually there's benefits in being open?
We're definitely seeing the recognition of that, right? As I said, right, BMW and Mercedes, right, they are part of that Eclipse project because I think they see the need for change. The industry is getting on a path that's no longer scalable and sustainable, with a lot of competition coming from new EV startups as well as from Chinese automakers, which doesn't have the history and the baggage, right, of a lot of traditional car makers in the Western world. So I would say that definitely they see a need to do that. The industry has been talking about open source for a number of years. I think what's changing now is we're now seeing actual actions and implementations that is driving towards a real implementation of open source based vehicle.
Francis Chow, he is the Vice President and General Manager of Red Hat In-Vehicle Operating System and Edge at Red Hat, and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah Show. Francis, thank you so much for your time, sir. We'll get you back on the program soon.
Thank you very much.
As VMware pushes its vision for private clouds built around core virtualization technologies, rival vendors are ramping up their efforts to create alternative stacks. OpenNebula, the open source virtualization stack based on the kernel-based virtualization machine, last week released version 7.0 of its suite and built it a major architectural leap thanks to redefined cloud edge orchestration engine designed to support distributed, sovereign, and intelligent infrastructure across hybrid and multi-provider environments. The new version also added support for ARM processors, plus enhanced PCI pass-through that allows full compatibility with NVIDIA-mediated virtual GPUs, which means that users can deploy OpenNebula in AI factories, NVIDIA speak, for data centers or infrastructure pods dedicated to AI workloads. So, Steve, my question to you is, so there's OpenHat's OpenShift virtualization, which is a work in progress, and last week reached version 4.19. The big addition is the technology previews to the platform running on Azure, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and Google Cloud. So once Red Hat nails those previews, it will be pretty close to parity with VMware in terms of partners that can contribute to this concept of hybrid cloud. If you woke up today and somebody sat in front of you and said, Steve, what do you think about virtualization? What direction would you steer him towards?
Well, that's kind of a broad question about what do I think about
We're in a hardware store. What tools should I buy, right? It's the equivalent. Well, what do you want to do?
Yeah, I suppose that's largely, we had a lot of conversations at Self around this kind of question. And sometimes the answer is you just need something minimal, right? You don't need, I need to run 4 or 5 VMs. I don't need to have a cluster of 17 boxes to host that, right? So ultimately, the job of an architect at Red Hat is to pair the client with the best technology that we can for their needs, right? And so with that in mind, the answer to what virtualization should I use really depends on where does your environment look like, where are you heading with the technology, what kind of needs do you have. I'd love it to be OpenShift virtualization because it's based on KVM, and I really do think that it provides a lot of big benefits, but it is an enterprise grade software. And so if you are a mom and pop shop, you might not start out there, maybe you do, but maybe you don't. It really depends on what are your needs and what sort of level of support are you looking for.
Yeah, so I think that's going to depend on the individual users, the individual environment, those sorts of things. I think what is of note to me is that VMware held this industry by the throat for many, many years, right? And you were almost looked at like you had four eyes if you had suggested something for virtualization other than VMware. It was like, oh, sure, because you can't afford the thing. Well, maybe I just don't want to live on the rug where it can potentially get ripped out. And I see this as an opportunity in our industry, very much like I see the opportunity of Windows 11 pushing people to Linux for us to land on a more open sourcey type solution. I want to see us ready for that. The good news is I feel like there are open source solutions and open source alternatives as far as the eye can see. And so I hope over the next few weeks, over the next few months, over the next year or so, there's an opportunity to have a really broad and very detailed, very robust discussion on what virtualization looks like to cover everything from what you're doing in your house. Because you, unless something has changed, you're still sticking with just libvirt on the metal.
Yeah, you know what? Getting back to the idea of like the open source future, it really is kind of here. Like if we look at the number of hypervisors out there, if we exclude what Microsoft is doing with Hyper-V, they're almost all now centering around KVM. And so if you want a good shot at being able to understand the technology, whatever hypervisor that company implements, getting a good firm foundation on how KVM works and just work with the raw KVM and all of its, you are going to be well positioned regardless of what kind of syntactic sugar a company puts on top of that.
Do you have a short list by way of like, here are the things that once you understand KVM would be my top list of things to play with or things to grow from?
I'm not sure that I understand the question.
So you have KVM, you know how to work with it on the command line, or you know how to work with it with libvirt. You said something to the effect of many of these companies are basing their products off of it. Do you have like a short list or some that you could throw out there?
Well, so Proxmox, and I believe you just said
OpenNebula.
The one that you just listed. I'm sorry, I blanked on it, but I also think like Nutanix is out there. OpenShift and KubeVirt are both based on KVM. Like there is a pretty large stack out there. I believe OpenStack also is using KVM under the hood. Like there's quite a bit out there that is using KVM.
Very good. So, like I say, open, robust discussion. It's an exciting time. Some people get concerned by change. I think it presents us a terrific opportunity to shake up a little bit, get all the people that were held hostage on VMware and get them onto something more freedom respecting. The music in our ears means we're out of time. I thank you for joining us. We do the show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. You can join us live by going to AskNoahShow.com. You can catch the entire back catalog at podcast.asknoahshow.com. I'm off doing all manner of things. You can keep up with the latest with me at noahc.us. I'm headed to OpenSauce. That's just 10 days away. I hope to see you there. It's in San Francisco, California. We're back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. AskNoahShow.com. Have a good week.